Pirate Kings, Pirate Queens, and non-binary monarchs of the sea, thank you again for coming to Sakura Kingdom. We made it. December 2nd, 2022, One Piece Set 1 Romance Dawn has finally hit shelves. I know I've been waiting. I'm sure you've been waiting. It is finally here. We can play with actual cards. The binder I have filled with proxies. Thank you again to Deltron for making those, helping us get the hype up, giving me a chance to test things out, and for giving me some great graphics to use in these videos. You're wonderful. Now has some actual cardboard in it. Shredded a box earlier tonight, and even before that, for the past week and a half, I've been working on something. I've wanted to do a nice breakdown of all these decks we have a chance to play with now, taking a look, trying to figure out what's best, what gets played the most often, what cards are successful, try and see some stats for how these decks stack up with each other. That's what we're going to get into today. I have gone on a deep data dive, deeper than the one I did a couple months ago when Set 1 format was just starting in Japan. And with that, I've been able to find a system to basically assign each of the leaders a point value for the ones we have to work with, giving average deck lists to see what goes into a winning deck for each leader, with some other stats lined up in there, and some nice visual representations in order to give another perspective on the conclusions we get to draw today. We are going to be considering all of the leaders that came out in the first 4 starter decks, Set 1, and the promo pack that's going to be distributed at local tournaments in stores, giving us a total of 13 leaders. Starter deck 5 with Shanks leader, all the film cards, that doesn't come out until February, so in order to give a representation of the format that we are able to play at the moment, we're not going to be including those cards. The lists that I've used for this analysis all came from Discord, either through online tournaments that were organized by international players, some of which I had the pleasure of organizing myself. To anyone who did play in those, thank you for doing so. Sorry I haven't been able to get back to that with the move and all the busy schedule I've had lately. I would love to do that again at some point if time ever frees up. But at the same time, we have all these in-store tournaments coming out now, so I do wonder if there is much of a necessity for that. And, you know, if I don't get back to it gives me some more time for content. Speaking of which, if you are enjoying this video, others that I've put out before, please give the like button a click. If you have thoughts on the conclusions I come to today, whether you agree, whether you got a cool idea, or whether you just want to argue with me, leave it down in the comment section. And if you enjoy the content, if you want to know as soon as it comes out, give that subscribe button and the notification bell a click as well. All of that is super appreciated, and I am very grateful for the audience that I've been able to have so far, and I'm just looking to grow this community and get some great information out there for y'all. In addition, the bulk of the lists we're looking at today came from the Kurita Coliseum Discord server, where they do a great job allocating all of these lists that have won in-store tournaments in Japan, sorted by leader. Definitely check that out. I'm going to leave a link in the description for you. And that's been able to give us an idea of what goes into a winning deck list, not just a participating deck list, but one that's able to go undefeated. And I think that's going to be the best way to find a good starting point for this. A quick disclaimer, the lists that we're going to go through today, they are more so starting points than anything. Every tournament's going to be different, every meta's going to be different, every player is going to be different, so there is going to be a lot of room for revision. I know that as I go into testing these decks, because, spoiler alert, the one I've played the most of is Kaido, everything else I have like 10 games or less with. Still a lot of room to grow there, still a lot of ideas I want to try out, but this has been helpful for me in order to find a nice starting point. Now, once I found all these lists, I took a look at how many winning placements each leader had, looked at the proportions of those, and that was sort of able to give me a nice sample metagame. Again, things are going to change as time goes on and in whatever area you may find yourself, but I think this is a decent representation of the format as a whole and a good way to establish an expectation of what you might run into if you go to a tournament. With that metagame and with the matchup data I was able to gather from those online tournaments that I had access to the pairings and deck lists for, I was able to take those, put them together, find percentile rankings for each one, and assign a point value to them by using the distance formula. For anyone who's an aspiring math nerd, basically just take the square of both, add them together, square root them. This will make sense with one of the last slides. You'll see a very visual representation of that. All you need to know is that we took both of these measurements, put them together so they weigh it equally, and that gives us a nice idea of where things stack up. I also have been able to get some price figures for these decks as well. At first, I was using price points from a Japanese card seller near the end of the set 1 format, and until tonight I thought that's what I would be using, but given the time it's taken me to make this, we have access to TCG player prices. For our actual market, this game is a lot cheaper than initially expected, which is wonderful. I, for one, can actually play multiple decks, and that's always nice. So hopefully those are helpful for you. These prices will probably go down a little bit more as time goes on and more boxes get open, more cards get into the market. But I feel like the biggest jump as far as the price decrease happened today with these cards hitting the market in general. So hopefully you enjoy that. In addition, we've got some nice stats for each leader. Most of these are going to be pretty self-explanatory, but I did give, some definitions here just in case there is ambiguity with any of them. Starting with the lists itself, the way I arrived at them is by taking all the different card counts I had from all the different decks on this spreadsheet, looking at which ones were most prevalent at a certain count. What I mean by that is, say we were comparing the 9-cost Kaido with the starter deck ulti in Purple Kaido. The ulti itself gets run in 77.8% of lists, and the Kaido gets run in 90%, but 72% of lists run 4 copies of ulti, but only 53% of lists run 2 copies of that 9-cost Kaido. And that is the count at which they're most often ran. So when I was making that list, I would say put the ulti at a higher priority than the Kaido. But if there ever was something where, say a card that got run 80% of the time didn't make it by the algorithm, I would of course correct for that. And then I took the entire list that I had and adjusted it to bring all these other measures we're going to talk about as close to the average as possible to give you a nice representation there. Above each deck list, you're going to see a table with values going from 1 to 10 and then a range below each of those number. That's the cost curve, the most common range for how many cards of a certain cost you're going to run. For example, an average red-green law deck will play 20 to 21 1-cost cards. That range was taken by looking at the mean, the average value, and taking the standard deviation, dividing it by 2, and that gives us the central, I believe, 30% of lists. So that's, a pretty sizable chunk, so you have some range in there, but you'll know it's pretty close to the center of what gets played in there. List and average cost, pretty self-explanatory. For the counter, that is the average total counter, so all your 1K characters, all your 2K counter characters, all of your 2K, 4K, weird sometimes 2K, sometimes 4K, which I decide to label as 3K counter events. The total defense of cards that you play from hand during your opponent's turn in there. And blocks and events, again, very self-explanatory. Those are the stats that we are going to be using for our video today. If there are any stats that I did not put in this that you think would be helpful to keep track of, please let me know. I'm always looking for ways to make the content that I give more informative and more useful for the community. So any thoughts or notes you have are very much appreciated. Now, looking at the share of these wins that the different leaders got, we do see a sort of expected metagame generating here. This lines up with what I think a lot of people had in mind. We see Kid and Kaido up there at the top, both around 20% there. Behind them, we have Dofi and Zoro, 12% of the metagame each. Law around 11%, Red Luffy around 8%, Odin at 6%, Blurple Kaido and Blue Crocodile both taking up 2.6% of those wins there. Blurple Crocodile at around 2% itself. And then we tried to use Google Sheets to come up with a template for the graph here, but it didn't want to give me little arrows and percent values for those last 3 decks there, so I just added them at the top there. Red Oot is at 1.12% of the metagame. Purple King and Red Green Luffy are at 0.37% each there. One thing to note is that these big monocolor leaders are taking up a very big majority of the metagame. It looks like about 65% of the metagame is shared by those first 4 leaders there, so they're definitely the ones you're going to expect to see most often. Now, I'm not sure how many rounds these big events for One Piece are going to be. I'm very used to 9-round day ones at Pokemon Regionals, so that's the number I'm going to use for this analogy here. In a 9-round regional, you'd probably expect to play 2 games each against Kid and Kaido, 1 game each against Dofi, Zoro, Law, Mono Red Luffy, and Green Odin, and then your last game would probably be one of those other ones near the bottom there. And of course, that will change depending on how well you do throughout the day, but on average, that's probably what it would stack up to. Starting things off in our number 13 spot with a sadly meager 5 points out of a possible 100 is the Red-Green Luffy from Set 1. He is on the cover of all of our packs. Sadly, he's at the bottom of our list here. I do think there are some reasons for that, aside from him just being bad. But going into his effect, once per turn, you can rest 4 Don, set one of your cost 5 or lower Supernova or Straw Hat characters to active, and give them an extra 1,000 power per turn. Now, this effect is very interesting to me because 4 is a big cost for your leader's effect. You know, it's one of those things where you're not using the Blue Crocodiles effect every turn when you're playing in those starter deck or limited deck battle events. It's something you've got to be a bit choosy with. And I think there's a decent difference between 4 and 3 when you're talking about your leader effect here. It's very similar to Green Kid's effect, so I think that a lot of people seeing that and seeing all the results it has achieved are going to gravitate to that before playing this. For Red-Green, Law is such a versatile deck that it's going to get a lot of that play, a lot of that testing in that this deck isn't going to get. That being said, I do think that, again, 4 is a high cost. You are a bit more limited in your card pool than you would be with Red-Green Law because you're going to want to predominantly be playing Straw Hats and Supernovas. You don't have access to those Wano characters from Set 1. So that kind of works against this. I don't necessarily think it's terrible, like I said. I do think it is underplayed, under-researched, potentially. I think that there are some pretty cool things you can do by capitalizing on this leader's effect specifically. And this list we have here is the only Japanese tournament winning list I was able to find. It's spicy. We've got 3 Otama, 2k counter, weaken our opponent's characters. Combo that with the Jet Pistol you see at the very end there to take out things like that 8-cost Kid. 2 each of Chopper and Beige for some chump blockers. 4 Bonnie and 3 Nami for search. 1 2-cost Sanji from Set 1. Gives you an extra 2k counter, which begs the question, why not just play 4 Otama? But he could be a very good end-of-game option. He does get up there with his effect, and you know, you could potentially use the Luffy effect on him to get another swing in there for a very high power amount. 4 of the Set 1 Luffy, get some of those Don back that you're resting with your leader effect. Nice cheap attacker there. 1 Brook in order to add another 2,000 counter and again reuse some Don there. 3 of the Nico Robin from Set 1, amazing attacker, really good to just get rid of some small cards on your opponent's board. 4 Rush Zoro, an obligatory inclusion in red. 4 of the Blocker Law from Set 1, you got some shenanigans you can do with him. You could protect your Bonnies so they don't just get taken out the turn after you use them. You can bounce your Zoro back from hand if you want to play him again, get a second surprise attack. And 1 of the Diaz Drake from Set 1, pop some rested small cost characters. 3 of the Rush Luffy, another great target for this leader effect because he's unblockable. 1 copy of the starter deck Law. This is one that I was really surprised to see in at only a 1 count because I feel like he is the secret to capitalizing on this leader effect. You go from 1 attack to 2 attacks to 3 attacks with the same character using this card. Then again, you know, even though I figure you'd play him at 2 at the least, I'm not the guy who won a tournament with this, so I can't say I'm a full authority on this deck. But I think exploring the potential for that star deck Law is the first thing I would do when I play this list. 2 of the 8-cost Kid, because if you're playing green, you might as well give him a try. There may be some lists that don't play him, but I think, you know, he's definitely worthwhile in a deck like this. 1 Radical Beam for counter, 3 Paradise Waterfall, counter and restand some stuff. 4 Red Hawk to counter and KO, potentially bring something down to 0 with its trigger effect. 1 Round Table, again taking care of those big cost characters, and then 3 Jet Pistol for removal. One thing I really want to try with this list is double attacker cards. Not really double attacker card because you don't get much use out of the Yamato from Set 1 with this. But I feel like the promo Kid could have a place to shine here. I feel like he gets outclassed by a lot of other cards with the release of Set 1, just because your opponent is going to spend resources to block that double attack from going in there. But at the same time, if you're using a double attack character twice to 3 times in one turn, that is a lot of resources your opponent has to give up in order to not lose 2 life. So I feel like if he's gonna find a home, it's gonna be with the red-green Luffy leader. This list is going to cost $143.53 at the current prices, so it's a bit on the higher end. You know, you've got those Zoros, you've got those kids, you've got those Rush Luffys. They're going to drive it up a bit. 51k counter, that's around the middle there. 5 2k characters, 8 blockers, so a decent amount there. And then 12 events, which is on the higher end of things overall. At number 12, we have Red Uta. We're going to get this in those promo packs that are going to be distributed at in-store tournaments coming up potentially this past night, if not tomorrow. She's a-coming. And her effect is, once per turn, you can rest 1 Don and give one of your characters without effects an extra 2,000 power during this turn. She is vanilla turbo. It's a very cool idea. I do think it is a bit gimmicky. One thing that I found really interesting about the couple of lists that managed to win tournaments in Japan is that compared to the online lists I was seeing, there are more characters with effects. It's not solely leaning into the vanillas, but it is leaning into power modification. In this list we have 4 Uta, 4 Chopper, 2 Nami to reuse that Don we're spending on Uta's effect, 2 of the promo Beppo, 2000 counter, and sort of a mini version of Robin's deletion when attacking. 2 Usopp for another 2k counter there, and maybe get a chance to draw some extra cards if your opponent tries to counter you with an event. 2 Hyogoro. This one's really interesting to me. When you play him, you can give a character an extra 2000 power, which is very much in line with this deck, just trying to get really high with a strong attacker there to try and get a big hit on your opponent's life there. 4 of the Rush Sanji to get some extra blows in. 3 of that Nico Robin from set 1 because she is just amazing in red. 4 of the Vanilla Robin, and we'll go into all the vanillas here. We have 4 of the Vanilla Luffy, 3 each of the Vanilla Yasopp, Ben Beckman, and Shanks, all from the promo pack. 2 of the Law from the promo pack, coming back up there to the 4 costs. He is the opposite of Hyogoro. He can give someone 2,000 less power on play, but he does have a better power, so he can function as an attacker as well, whereas Hyogoro, it's going to be a bit harder to get decent attacks in with him, so, you know, I think there's room for both of them in here. We have 2 guard point. I don't think I saw Radical Beam being played in these Japanese lists, but the first thing I'm going to do is replace those with Radical Beam because I feel like it is just more bang for your buck, given the fact that you can, you know, let yourself go a bit low on life to give that some extra counter there and play into the long game there. 2 Red Hawk, 4 Jet Pistol. Again, I think this deck is just a bit gimmicky. That's probably why it's not getting as many placements. It can win games, but, you know, it's just, I don't think it's going to serve you that well over a whole day at an event. Very cheap here, $37.37 for the list I've built right here, $45.02 on average. Quick note, these numbers may be a bit lower than what they're going to be. For the promo cards, I just took the $5 you're spending on your entry, divided by 12 for each of the characters in there. These may be a bit higher once they come out there. People may be interested in getting the promos if they're just really interested in the film stuff, and it may take a little more time for people to start listing them on TCG Player, for stores to give out their entire supply there, unlike, you know, the set and the Star decks. So that may go up a little more, but it's still going to be pretty cheap. 54k counter, 6 2k characters, 6 blockers, and 6 events on average. That is Red Uta. Next, at 27 points, we have Blurple Crocodile. His effect is when he has a Don attached, after you activate an event, you may draw 1 card if you have 4 or less cards in your hand and haven't drawn a card using this leader's effect during this turn. This is something you can use on your turn and your opponent's, something to keep in mind there. This deck is meant to be annoying. You can already see this has a lot of defense. It's going to have a very weak early game, but once you get past that, your opponent's going to have to work really, really hard to take that last life. In this list, we have 4 of the Blocker Law, 4 of the Robin, or Miss All Sunday, I should say, from set 1. Also a blocker, but on KO, you can get an event back from your trash. So you can reuse a lot of these very annoying events there. Even if the opponent were to KO her with something like a Who's Who, they still get that effect. So if you're trying to counter this, I guess, you know, something like Okiku to make it so she can't block you in the first place might be a better route to approach that, but she can be very, very annoying in the games I've played against this deck. 4 of the Mr. 2 Bon Clay, another 2k counter, and he can fetch you a Baroque Works event, but this list only runs Spada, though there are some options there. I personally want to play with the Baroque Works event card there, just to thin, maybe find those Bone Clays, maybe find the Desert Spadas, find the 7-cost Crocodile in there. For Sasaki, gets you some Don ramp early on because you can't use Onigashima in this list, and he can also function as an early game attacker. 2 Gecko Moria from the starter deck. We can get our Laws back, we can get him and our Mihawk back. However, we're not running as many Warlords as something like, say, Doflamingo, so he's not going to be as active all the time with that effect, giving us some room for some other cards, like, again, that 4-cost Mihawk. With the Don't Attach, when he attacks, you draw 2 cards, discard 2, great to cycle, even better because he's a 2-cost counter. Obvious 4 of here. 4 of the Queen, again, a blocker that lets you draw cards, why wouldn't you play 4 of it? 2 of the 6-cost King, going to let you get some spot removal there, function as a nice attacker in that mid game there. We have 4 of the 7-cost Crocodile from set 1. When this card got revealed, I was so excited just because I wanted to make Baroque Works work as a pure deck. Obviously, it's not gonna, but I'm gonna try it, and I think this would be the leader to do it with, but it's not quite how this leader works optimally. The 7-cost Crocodile, when he has a Don't attached, he is able to let you play your blue events for 1 less cost, and he has Banish, which is a pretty powerful effect to have. We have the 9-cost Kaido in here at 2. Rush, delete something, big attacker on board to try and finish things off. A note about this is that there were only a few lists that topped for the blue-purple Crocodile. I want to say it was 4 or 5, and for that, the 9-cost Kaido and the 9-cost Mihawk were both very, very similar, I think. There was one more copy of Kaido played than Mihawk across all those lists, so that's why I put him in here at the 9-cost slot. But again, very, very easy to substitute with the Mihawk if that's more the direction you want to go in with that. For the events, we have 4 Desert Spada, 2k counter, rearrange the top of your deck, and on trigger you can draw 2, discard 1. Again, great for just building that hand up with a lot of counters, a lot of resources, a lot of events. Just really make the game hard for your opponent on their turn. 4 Blast Breath, cheapest 4k counter we have, pure efficiency, easy inclusion there. Then 4 Overheat and 4 Love Beam. These are only going to cost you 1 with your 7-cost Crocodile effect. Overheat can let you bounce something. Love Beam lets you draw some more cards, adding to our arsenal here. This deck can be annoying, but if your opponent is able to play around you, if they are able to outlast you, if they're able to be smart with where they put their attacks, there is a chance that you still get run over in that long game as you keep taking life there. But still, you can do some very fun stuff with this. It's one of the decks I have been the most excited to play in this format, and I cannot wait to start getting some games in with this. It's also pretty cheap. This list is only $44.34. On average, it's even cheaper at $33.36. 72k counter. That is nuts. 9 2k characters, 11 blockers, again on that higher end, but I don't think it's the most we're going to see today. And then 16 events. That is a lot. That's crazy. So big counter, big defense, big plan, 5 years, make a casino, take over desert country, play the long game. Heading into number 10 and breaking that 30-point mark, we have another Crocodile, the Mono Blue Crocodile from the starter deck. His effect is, during your turn, you can put 4 Don back into the Don deck and return a character card with a cost of 5 or less to its owner's hand. So where the blue-purple Crocodile was looking to inconvenience your opponent through sheer defense, this one's more looking to play a stall game on the board itself. Now again, -4 is a pretty big cost for a leader effect. You're not going to be using this every turn a lot of the time. You do want to make sure that you are smart with how, when, and whom you bounce with this, but you can set your opponent back pretty far with him. Before I go into the list itself, I do want to mention something about the data I found here. There, again, weren't a ton of lists here, but there was a very noticeable shift in the deck composition about halfway through the format. There was a list that I think won a 270-something player event. I want to say in Thailand. Correct me if I'm wrong. Don't quote me on it. But once that list came out, the other winning lists very much followed in suit with the choices it made. Namely, the Smiley, the Jinbei, the Caesar Clown, and just that very high amount of top end here. Going to the list itself, we have 4 of the Blocker Law, 2 Smiley. When he has a don't attach, he gets an extra 1,000 power for each card in your hand, so he can get pretty beefy there depending on how you're doing with hand size, and you can just cheat him out with the Caesar. 4 of the set 1 Jinbei. On play, he can bring a small character to the bottom of your opponent's deck. The fact that he has an on-play trigger is what really lets him get there. But, if he's going to be in any kind of list, he's going to be in one where the whole theme of it is bouncing things back to hand. He can, put some chump blockers out there, put something like a Nico Robin back into the hand. Maybe make your opponent waste a little bit of Dome before you start bouncing things with the Crocodile, so he can be good for your early game. 4 Elvita and 2 Bone Clay. These are really just here for the 2k counter. You're never using Bone Clay's effect, and if you're using Elvita's effect, you're probably 2 behind anyway, and she's not going to do much for you. 4 Centimaro. He was great in the Star decks during the limited battles, during those Star deck tournaments. He still has a home here. 4 Caesar Clown. When he is KO'd, you can play a Smiley, get him out there for free. 1 of the Blocker Pacifista. This was very interesting to me. It's a card that you can play infinite copies of when we're choosing to just play 1 here, but I'm sure there's a good reason for that in order to have a nice versatility in your pacifistas, but be able to get on the offensive side in order to put some pressure on your opponent. 4 of that Blocker Hancock with a don't attached. She can draw you an extra card if your hand size is low enough when she blocks or attacks. Again, 4 of that 2k counter Mihawk from the Star deck, 3 of the 6k vanilla pacifista, and then for our top end we are running 4 of the Star deck Doflamingo to bounce something with 7 cost or less back in our hand, 4 of the 9 cost Mihawk to bounce something 7 cost or less to the bottom of your opponent's deck. This is great if you're facing down one of those 7 cost kid blockers in the green kid deck. Really stops your opponent from just spamming every turn and making it that much harder for you. I know that there were some lists playing Virgo in there. I do think he's a very good card, but he wasn't quite the prevalence to make it into the cut for this just average list, but I'm definitely going to be playing with him once I put more games in with Mono Blue Crocodile. 2 Overheat and 4 Love Beam. I think the way these ones were put together, these lists I should say, there's a very fair case for just swapping the counts here, but I think Love Beam is the one to go with here, just because it does get you those extra cards. You've got a lot of bounce already, but if you really want to lean into that play style, lean into the gimmick of this deck, go for it. $46.99 is how much this list is going to cost you. But wait, there's more. Average is going to cost you $45.16. 59k counter, so we are getting up there. There's not much short of the blue-purple crocodile list we just went over that is going to get that high as far as counter power. 9 2k counter characters, 9 blockers, and 6 events. This was my go-to leader for starter deck battles, and would have been for limited if I had found the time to play limited, but every other color gets so much, and he's kind of outclassed by Blue Doflamingo, who can really lean into the card pool there by being able to cheat things out, that he does sort of fall by the wayside. But as players have demonstrated overseas, he can do very well if you have the right list and you know how to play him right. So I'm really excited to see what he does in the international set 1 format. For number 9, we're going to hit you with some more Blurple with our boy Kaido. 39 points for him. When he has a Don attached on your turn and once per turn, you can add an extra Don from your Don deck active when one of your opponent's characters is KO'd. So this is capitalizing more on that destruction aspect of purple, letting you ramp, in a sense, even faster than the mono purple Kaido list does. So you can get even more out of your Don minus effects and then recover from them a little bit easier here. I remember when set 1 first got revealed, this was being touted as the undisputed best deck of format, and I still think that he's very strong, but the main thing holding him back is just these dual colored. A lot of these dual color leaders are, as we've seen, very low relatively on this tier list. And that's because if your opponent has to get one less hit on you, that can make a world of difference for how soon they're able to close out the game and how on guard you have to be against them. In this list, we have 4 of the Blocker Law from the Star deck, 4 Higurashi, just some nice chump blockers, really help you out to soak up some of those attacks there. 2 Who's Who for some early game removal. If you've seen my Kaido deck video, you know I'm not a big fan of playing Who's Who at 4, just because he can sometimes clog up your hand because he has no counter. And I'm of 2 minds of that in this list as well. because he is so useful for what this deck is trying to do, and you do have the ramp to recover from that one Doan you're trying to get out of there, but at the same time, you really do need to have those defenses. So at 2, I don't think that you are at much of a risk of bricking with him. I'm curious about trying him out at 4 in this list, but there is that bit of trepidation when it comes to making that choice. We've got 2 of the Sasaki, another 2k counter, again, more ramp, we love ramp in purple. 3 of the Hancock, get some use out of that blocker here. 3 of the set 1 page 1. This is a card that I have not been too crazy about in mono purple Kaido, just because there are so many other things that you want to do. A lot of the times you want to use your ulti to counter instead of cheating them out, so I feel like, that advantage is lost in mono purple Kaido. But I do think he has a place in this list, because if you're able to attack your opponent's characters, that's another KO you can get. It's another opportunity to ramp in the relatively early game. And, you can get rid of some chump blockers, so you can try and get a little further, push toward them, and try and, make up for that lack of life that you have in this deck. We have 4 of the Starter Deck Mihawk. Again, obvious inclusion for DS Drake. Amazing 2k counter. You can rip a card out of your opponent's hand if you really need to. And he has, decent 5k stat line. You don't have to put any Don't on him to get a swing in once he's out there. 4 Queen, obligatory. And then 2 each of both Kings and both Kaidos there. Again, this is a skeleton list. This is a starting point. I could easily see us replacing, maybe the page 1 or something like that, or shaving down some other counts to put more of these cards in, especially the Kaidos, because, again, you can recover from their effects a little more easily, including with their own effects. So they are very, very powerful in this list, and this lets them really see their full potential. 4 Blast Breath, obligatory. 2 each of Overheat and Love Beam, and 4 Onigashima, because if you're playing Animal Kingdom Pirates, you want to ramp, obviously, no questions there. 49.56 for the list that we are seeing right here. 42.43 on average, so under $50, very, very affordable. 59k counter, again, we're getting up there with the defenses, which we need to in a dual color deck. 10 2k characters, 14 blockers, heavy on the defenses once again, and then 8 events in here. Now we've reached the point where I'm ready to see the huge dip in engagement with this video, because for anyone who didn't see this coming, I don't have King at the very bottom of this list. It's polarizing. I'm surprised that he is at number 8 with 43 points, that he's above Blurple Kaido, even with, the dual color weakness that Blurple Kaido has. When he was revealed with set 1, there were Discord reacts spelling out bad pack filler, and I get it. He seems to go against everything Purple has established itself to want to do. Because on your turn, if you have exactly 10 Dome cards on your field, all your opponent's characters have minus 1,000 power. So the inverse of the Zoro leader, but with a much narrower activation window. And I have some thoughts on this. 1, my data could just be terrible. There's only one winning list from Japan. The reason that he is here and not right down there with Regri and Luffy is because the matchup data I have gives him a pretty decent spread. That may just be because there were relatively less games played with King. I tried to adjust for that in the way that I did my matchup percentages. But again, it could be imperfect. People were able to win games with him, though. Like, he's not just going to automatically fold to everything. And seeing one card in particular in this list, really 2 cards in the list that was actually played in Japan, made me think about the fact that King is very different in the way he wants to be built from other purple decks. Mono purple Kaido, and especially Blurple Kaido, are really trying to just sacrifice their Don in order to wipe out the opponent's board. Whereas King, I feel like what you would want to do with him is ramp to get to that 10 Don mark, and then dominate from the board itself through aggression and powerful attackers. I feel like what King needs is more cards that say, if you have X amount of Don, you get this effect. Sadly, we just don't have many of them. Literally right before I recorded this section, I went through One Piece card dev again, and the prospects just aren't great. I think this could be a really cool avenue for Purple to explore. Sadly, we're just not there yet, but I'm gonna hold out hope that it could be something we see, because I would like King to take some scalps. But again, one list did manage to win a tournament in Japan. This is that exact list with a small substitution. again. We've got 2 Black Maria and 4 Higurashi for our chump blockers, 2 Husu for that removal, 4 Sasuke counter and ramp, 3 of the Black Maria blockers just to keep our defenses up here, 4 GS Drake, and 3 Kyoshiro. This is the card that really got me thinking about how King can and probably should be run. When he is played, if you have at least 8 Don on the field, you get to draw a card. And is that going to be the best effect ever for 5 cost? Maybe not, but he's still going to be able to swing for a decent amount because he's starting at 6 that turn after you play him. And he has the same stat line as Queen, and you essentially have the same card advantage. Queen is a blocker. Obviously, I'm not gonna say Kyoshiro's a better card than Queen. That is ludicrous. But it opens up the way I want to think about this deck. The card that's not in here is Golden Lion Shiki from the Film Starter deck. It's another one of those cards that says if you have X amount of Don, you get this effect. For Shiki, he says if you have 8 Don, he can't be KO'd in battle, which is nice. And when the Film Starter deck comes out, I'm definitely gonna try him out in here. We just don't have him, and we just don't have a lot of those cards. I think the other one we have is the Who's Who from set 1, but he just gets an extra 1,000 power, which doesn't quite seem worth it when there's other purple things you could play. We've got the 4 Queen, obligatory, 2 of each King, 3 Fukurokuju. Again, that's what I took the Shiki out for, just a nice big body for 6 cost, vanilla beatdown, and then 2 of the 9 cost Kaido and 3 of the 10 cost Kaido, just because the 10 cost Kaido is so worth it. And, you know, the 9 cost can be good for closing out a game. 4 Blast Breath, 2 Elephant's Marshu in order to KO some stuff, 6 Brachio Bomber for more KOs, trying to get a bit of a control on your opponent's board there, and then 3 Onigashima. That one really is strange to me, but I think the reason for it is because you're not trying to use these heavy Don removal effects as much. You're still playing 5 of your very, very top end with those big ones, but minus Don isn't as prevalent in a deck like this. Really, you want to be conservative with when you use those minus Don effects, put them for the right time, and then just try and be as aggressive on the board as you can. I think a card that I'd like to play in this is the Rush Queen, something that I thought would be pretty cheeky in the mono purple Kaido, but I feel like could have a home here. Again, I'm not saying this deck is good. The data tells me it's just the best of the not great stuff. That's how I want to put this with King. If he's cheap, 4580 for this deck, 48k counter, 8 2k characters, 13 blockers, again on the higher side there, and then 9 events. At the very least, while King does not have a lot going for him in terms of winning placements, I think he's got a lot going for him in fun. And isn't that what matters? Probably not, because you're watching a video that's essentially a tier list. But hey, let's have some fun. That's King. And now we're going to enter into a phase of this tier list with some more established, more viable choices. Everything before now has had less than 10 first place finishes. Everything from here on is going to have more than 15, so they've got some more results behind them. And we're starting at number 8 with Brozuki, Broden, the boiled Chad himself. Once per turn, you can trash a Wano Country type card from your hand, set 2 of your Don cards as active. So you're going to lose a bit on hand advantage, but we do have plenty of targets here. We've got 4 Momo, Searcher, get him right out there, 4 of the beige for blocking, and then 4 Bonnie as well. I was really surprised that Bonnie was so prevalent in here, but we run like almost 20 Supernova cards in this deck. She is going to be hitting things pretty often. And with that much search, you are going to have a decent amount of cards in your hand, and you'll be able to get this effect off. 4 of the blocker killer, because you are going to be swarming your board. 4 Nekomamushi to rest your opponent's characters. 4 Izo to rest your opponent's characters, and also get that nice 2k counter. Izo is such a great card. 2 of the Star Deck Killer. I think it was pretty close as far as whether you played 4 of him or 2 of him. I'm personally not a big fan of playing 4 Star Deck Killer. In a sense, he's a worse Who's Who, because the opponent's character has to be rested. Yes, he has the 1000 counter, but there are lots of other cards that do have a 1000 counter. And so I think because he's so situational, I don't want to run him as 4 of. But, you know, there is something to be said about playing him, because we just went over 2 4-ofs that let you rest your opponent's characters. He does have some use. 4 Raizo, we love drawing cards, and in this deck, he actually does have a chance to really get that effect off. 4 Okiku, 2 of the blocker law to swap some stuff out there. Maybe get those Ezos back into hand. Replace him with a killer to play it for free. There are lots of tricks you can do with him. 3 of the DS Drake, and 4 Kinemon. Great card for the deck, kind of the heart and soul of it. If Odin's your leader, you can play a 9 Scabbards with 3 or less cost from your hand when you play him. If he has a Don't attached, when he attacks, you can set one of your red Scabbards with a cost of 3 or less as active. So he lets you swarm, get you some extra attacks in, green in a nutshell. Then we've got 1 Eustace Kid. Might as well play him there, but he's not, a centerpiece of the deck like he is in Mono Green Kid, for example. 4 Paradise Waterfall to unrest your characters, and then 2 Punk Gibson for the extra defense, and maybe a chance to get a nice K off trigger. Odin is strong. Getting to essentially have 12 Dome per turn opens you up to a lot of plays. But I do think this deck has a decently high skill ceiling, and discarding a card from your hand can be a relatively big cost, especially as you get into the late game, and you need to be able to counter out your opponent. So he can win some games, but he does have some weaknesses, so he is at the bottom of our upper echelon of decks here. List costs $60.64. On average, it's going to cost you $73.67. 53k counter, so around the average there. 6 2k characters, 8 blockers, and 7 events on average. We love our boy. We love the Shogun. That's Odin. At number 6, we've got our rubber boy himself, Mono Red Luffy with 54 points. Once per turn, you can give this leader or one of your characters a rested Dome card. Where decks like Zoro are going to try and go wide with their board, Luffy is trying to go tall. Just get something really big that can hit your opponent super hard, make it hard for them to counter out of that big attack. He was widely touted as the worst leader in the starter decks, and he most definitely was in that format, but he has some nice tools to use here in set 1, which has propelled him to tier 2 2.5 status, I'd say. You got 4 Otama, 4 Chopper, 4 Nami to really reuse that Dome. 4 of the Searcher Nami, get us some consistency, something that he really wants. This deck in Japan had a high Bartolomeo presence, which I usually have not been a fan of, but with the fact that you can just give him one of those extra Dome, he can be a pretty good blocker for you. 4 of the Sanji, again, good target to make tall like I talked about with Uta, but in most cases, a good 2k counter to have. 4 of the Promo 6, I believe, Luffy. This is probably the card that I was most fascinated to see getting played in Japan. I believe it was distributed as a promo in an issue of V-Jump. We're going to be getting it in that tournament participation / tournament winner pack that we're going to be able to get our hands on pretty much immediately. In addition, he has 2k counter. That's awesome. When he has 2 Don't attached, he gains an extra 2,000 power. So when you play him, you spend 3 Don't. Turn after that, you pay 1 Don't for something, maybe a Nami. You then reattach that Don't to the Luffy, and then use 1 more active Don't to get that effect going. So you've essentially spent 4 Don't on him. Then with the Don't attachments and with the extra 2k, he is at 7. So 4 cost, 7k attacker essentially. That is a really good ratio. That's better than the vanillas. And if he manages to stick around for another turn and you can keep attacking with him, that efficiency just keeps on going. So I'm a really big fan of this card, way more than I thought I would be. I didn't realize how much I liked this card until I saw him on the spreadsheet in this list. 4 Nico Robin, 4 Zoro, just obligatory for red. Same with the Star Deck Luffy. You can really build him up and just get past all their blockers. And then 4 of the secret rare, Shanks. He has Rush, and when he's attacking, your opponent can't use any blockers with 2,000 or less powers to stop him. Now, I know that for Shanks versus the Star Deck Luffy, it's the same Don't investment for the same amount of power. And then the Rush Luffy can get past all blockers. So, something like a Queen isn't going to stop him. But the thing is, Shanks does have a little more staying power, because Luffy loses that extra power when your opponent's turn passes, and he has more of a chance to get taken out. So with Shanks, you get more long-term use out of him. And you're running both of them anyway. Why not? If you don't have to choose between them, then no downside there. 2 Red Hawk and 4 Jet Pistol for your events here. This deck is definitely on the costlier side. $202.65 for this list. $146.61 for the average list. I just saw that Shanks was at 4 most of the time, so that's a fun little stats paradox for you. Shanks is definitely the one driving the cost here, but, I thought Shanks was going to be a $50 card. He's only $25 right now, so seeing that this deck is $200 instead of $300, That's great. And most of the stuff you're going to be running in red Zoro anyway, except for the Shanks. But still, if you like secrets, if you want to play this deck, and you're already trying red, why not give it a shot? We have 42k counter, so definitely on the low side, but, you know, it's red. It's just trying to aggress and, you know, whatever happens, happens. 11 2Ks, 8 blockers, and 8 events on average. It has come a long way from where it was in the starter deck format, and I think it's going to do some pretty cool things once we get into these international tournaments. And now for another splash of multicolor, we have Red Green Law in at number 5 with 69 points, a very nice leader. And it really has the chance to take advantage of that expanded card pool you get with 2 different colors. When I was looking at the spreadsheet and saw just how many different card choices people made for Law, it was amazing to see. Once per turn, you can rest 2 Doan, and if you have 5 characters out, return one of those characters to the owner's hand, and then you can switch it out with a character of cost 5 or less of a different color than that returned character. This is a deck that is, again, going to have a lot of different options for what you play, and is going to have a pretty high skill ceiling for how you play it. This deck is super combo oriented, so if that's something that appeals to you, it is the deck for you. It does require a lot of thought into how you're going to play your turn. And in a game like this, when there is so much interaction during your own turn, there's going to be a lot of adjustment to your plan that needs to be taken into account, which is perfect for Law. As another quick tangent, this has been basically an hour-long tangent as a video already. Law is one of those cards that really shows how you can reflect the IP in the game itself. His ability is basically shambles. The play style is exactly the way Law would approach a fight. I am just so impressed by what they did to make this card. You're going to have a very, very bottom-heavy cost curve in order to get that effect off. But in doing so, you know, you have a lot of game plans and versatility at your disposal. The list we have here has 4 Otama and 4 Chopper. We have 1 Nami just to meet that cost curve while also keeping all those other numbers on average. She could very easily be a 4th beige and is probably going to be a 4th beige when I'm testing it, but, you know, just show some options there. We've got 4 each of Bonnie and Nami. Again, we love consistency. 4 Nekomamushi, really nice to tap down our opponent's stuff when we are comboing off so hard just to try and will down their defenses, especially since we have 4 life. We do want to, you know, get those blows in when we can. 4 of the Brook from the starter deck. 2k counter lets you reuse from Doan if you're going to be playing all these characters and you might not be able to attack with them the turn you do. It will be nice to be able to, you know, reuse your resources. 3 Robin, 4 Zoro, very standard. 4 of the blocker Law, as if we weren't comboing enough, you can bounce something back to your hand, say a Brook, play this Law, bounce something else, and play a Rush Zoro, or bounce a Rush Zoro for a Rush Zoro to use them again. There are so many options in this deck. 3 of the Rush Luffy, 2 of that starter deck Law to stand something that you may have replayed. 4 Paradise Waterfall. It's really nice to be able to restand your characters, especially those low cost ones, just so that your opponent can't whittle down their board without having to really put some resources into it. And then Jet Pistol in order to get some board deletion in there. Great deck. It has so much power, so many options. I just can't say that enough. It really does. It's just, you know, still at 4 life, which can be a big weakness if your opponent's able to pop off and outrun you. It's still very much in a good spot. It just doesn't break that same level as these next 4 decks are going to. Again, you know, a bit on the more expensive side, but I'd say still pretty manageable for a competitive deck at 134.58 for this list, 132.03 for the average, 43k counter. So again, you know, on the lower side of defenses, but you're trying to combo off and really make the most of that. 11 2k counters, 6 blockers, and 6 events. Heading into number 4, we have another big jump from power level from one deck to another. We've got Blue Doflamingo with 85 points. When he has 2 Don't attached, you can rest 1 as he attacks. Look at the top card of your deck. If it's a Warlord with 4 cost or less, you can play it, rest it. So you're trying to swarm your board, you're trying to get a lot of blockers out, a lot of different options, and this has another big skill ceiling, similar to Law, just more so about top deck and planning turns in advance, rather than most of your thought being to, okay, how do I play this turn to get the combo? Still a lot of planning that goes into there, and you're still going to have some very complex turns sometimes just with the sheer amount of sequencing and the different effects that can interact with each other in this deck. So it's very rewarding the more games you play with it. 4 Law, 4 Perona in order to get the top deck in there. She's one of the cards you want to mulligan for. 4 Elvita, again, really just for the counter. 4 of the blocker Doflamingo that lets you rearrange the top 5 cards of your deck, just like Perona when he's played. You really want to mulligan for one of those 2 cards when you're playing this deck. 4 Centauro, because we do get to take advantage of our Pacifistas. 2 of the Teach from the starter deck. 4 of the Kuma, a blocker, also plays a Pacifista when he's KO'd, so there's lots of function for those Pacifista in there. 4 Hancock, versatile blocker. 4 Gecko Moria, this is the deck it is meant for. You have so many Warlords here. It just adds to your options, adds to your long-term planning, adds to that reward you get for really, really taking the time in testing to understand all the little pieces of how this deck works. Something that I cannot wait to truly understand about this deck. 4 Mihawk, 3 of the Star Deck Pacifista, 2 each of the Star Deck Dofi and the Set 1 Mihawk. Again, just like in Crocodile, Virgo is a very, very good option if you want to just get some big stuff out on curve. I'm definitely going to try some Virgo in here just because he can really, really give your opponent a hard time when they're already trying to control your board because they don't want it to get too out of hand, and he has a good amount of staying power. Then for the events, this version has 2 Desert Spada for some more top deck rearrangement and counter, and 3 Overheat. The Overheat could very easily be replaced with Love Beam. It's just like Crocodile where the stats were leaning one way or another. Overheat, again, just very, very narrowly edged it out, but I think there's a strong, strong case for Love Beam just because you get to draw those cards, you get those options. And for me, half the fun is, in addition to seeing, okay, I have the top 5 cards in my deck, I draw this, I play this, I draw this, I play this, seeing how things like Love Beam or even that 4-cost Mihawk, if you do draw with him, can throw a potential wrench into that planning, and having to think about that, that's one of the really fun things about card games for me. So Dofi is definitely going to be one of those decks that I find myself playing a lot, because I'm just a, filthy blue degenerate. Great times. This list is super, super cheap because those Mihawks, I thought you'd be paying for $10 for those, but they're only like $2 a pop. $35.17 for this list. $35.35 on average. 62k counter, lots of defenses here. 6 2k characters, 16 blockers. This has defense that rivals Blurple Crocodile, but with a bit more potential to execute your strategy. And then 4 events on average. You're not trying to play a ton of events in this list, but the ones you do play, you can get some mileage out of them. You just don't want to overwhelm the list with it. I hate Dofi so much, but right now I love Dofi. Number 3, also 85 points. It's pretty much on the same level as Doflamingo, but I think, those whatever points put him just ahead, is Red Zoro. With 1 don't attached, on your turn, all your characters gain 1000 power. It's a very simple ability, but it's really, really powerful. If you're new to the game, 1000 might not seem like much, but attacking with 6000 versus 5000 is the difference between your opponent having to be able to counter with just 1 card, or having to play 2 cards, or use one of their 2k counters. And you're going wide with this. If you have a full board, which you probably won't a majority of the time, will probably be somewhere in the middle there, it can essentially be an extra 5000 power per turn. He's really, really good at just giving you that pressure to put on your opponent. We play 4 Otama in this list, 4 Chopper, standard, 4 Nami, because you can just keep on using those Don. 4 of the Searcher Nami as well for consistency. 2 of that Beppo from the promo, just because we do like those nice aggressive options and he's a 2k counter. 3 of the Set 1 Sanji. 4 of the Set 1 Luffy, again another cheap attacker to fill up the board, reuse Don, get some high power on there. 3 Rush Sanji, because this deck is trying to lean a bit into Rush compared to some other red lists we've seen. 4 of the Robin. 2 of the Set 1 Uta. This is a card that surprised me. On play, you can get a red character with cost 3 or less from your trash to your hand. So those Rush Zoros, those Rush Sanjis, your blockers, your Otamas for counters. Most of this list, literally 37 cards in this list you can just get back with Uta. And again, the fact that we have so much Rush in this deck just makes getting them back even more advantageous for you. 3 of the Rush Luffy. We're not playing any Shanks at the moment. There were a couple lists that do play 1 copy of it, but again, this is a list that's trying to go wide instead of going tall, and using your entire turn on Shanks isn't always the best thing. He might be able to get you out of some tricky scenarios or close out some games, but he is not used much more often. 2 Diable Jambe, get around those blockers, give him a barrage, 3 Red Hawk, and 4 Jet Pistol for pressure. He's really good now, and if you've been looking at any of the results from Japan for Set 2, Zoro doesn't just conquer the meta for Set 2, he is the meta for Set 2. So if you're going to plan to play this game for a while, get some games in with Zoro. He's got a lot of long-term potential for you. And he's not a brain-dead deck by any means, because, again, there is some thought that needs to be put in here as far as sequencing. But he is a really good deck to learn the game with. So I think he has that going for him as well. He's going to be seeing a fair amount of play. $102.76 for this list. $109.59 average. Absolutely wonderful. 46k counter. We're playing red. 8 2k characters, 4 blockers, and 11 events on average. Mono red Zoro. And at number 2, with 89 points, we've got Mono Green Kid. A lot of people are going to say this is number 1. I figured he was going to be number 1, but the data decided to throw me a curveball. He's an amazing, amazing deck. I think the reason that he is number 2 is because of matchup spreads. Number 1 has a very, very similar placement rate, but with a slightly better matchup across the board. But do not sleep on Kid. No one's sleeping on Kid, but Kid is a threat. This deck is cracked. Amazing leader ability. Rest 3 Doan, discard a card, set him back to active. At the end of the game, when you have 10 Doan out, you're swinging for 12 twice in a turn. Notwithstanding any other characters you have, he's going to come in for the kill at the end of the game. And you've got a decent amount of defense here to get you there, and some really nice ways to mess with your opponent. He has one of the best defensive options, with really 2 of the defensive options with the 2 Kid character cards. Very aggravating to play against if you don't have options, and if you do have options, cool, you had to build your deck to beat Kid. He has warped the entire metagame through all the Japanese format. He was the deck to beat. I do think that as we come into this version of the format overseas, people kind of see the threat coming a little more. People are planning to play around him. So that does put a bit of a target on his back, which hurts his standing. For this list, we are playing 4 beige for blockers, 4 Bonnie. You're able to fetch so many cards with her in this list. 4 of the blocker killer. You might not be able to draw with him all the time, but he's still a blocker and he still makes your opponent focus on your board. 3 Nekomamushi to rest your opponent's characters. 4 Apu, just playing him for the 2k. 4 Izo, again, great option to mess with your opponent, and you can bring him back up with the law, just like the Nekomamushi. 2 of the Stardeck Killer, 4 Beppo, it's another 2k counter. I remember that in the first big online Discord tournament, there was a Green Kid list that won. It was playing Beppo, it was playing the Shachi and Penguin package, it was playing the Jean Bart from the Hearts Pirates, because when Beppo attacks but don't attach, you can cheat out a 4-cost or lower Heart Pirates character for free. But just look at this list, there's so many other cards that are going to take you so far. He's really just there for the counter. And he can be a small attacker, but he has 2k counter, so he's worth it. 4 Okiku, rest your opponent's characters when you attack with her. She is just a menace. Always one of the cards I'm trying to get rid of as soon as I can when I'm playing Kaido. She's what I save my Who's for when I'm playing against this. 4 of the blocker law, again, lots of shenanigans you can do here, and a great blocker for the end game. 4 of the Diaz Drake to get rid of those characters you've rested. 2 of the 7-cost blocker kid. This card is going to stick. Even if you're, playing Dofi and you manage to bounce him with the 7-cost Dofi, you really want to use your Mihawk on him because you just don't want this card coming back out, especially when the 8-cost kid is in play. With 1 Don't attached, your opponent can only attack characters named Eustace Kid. And even with that blocker, again, he's so beefy that it's going to be a lot of resources to get through him. And if you don't, cool, your opponent has to deal with this guy. They're probably going to spend most of their turn doing it, especially if you've managed to get your beige, your killer, your law out to keep defending it as well. And even when you play him, you don't get to attack with him the first turn he's out. You can play a 3-cost or lower character for free to get him rested immediately and start using that effect. This is the card that set 1 revolves around. 2 Paradise Waterfall. 2 Punk Gibson. Small event package, but enough to keep you going there and get some more shenanigans off. This deck is cracked. This deck is ridiculous. There is some variance in how to build it as well. There is a Wano version of it that plays the Momonosuke that has seen some play. I should have mentioned before with Law, there was a Wano variant of that. There are multiple ways to play this deck. It's really, really, really fun to play. I really enjoy it, and yeah, get this deck. It's not too expensive. It's only $88.68 for this list. Just shy of 90 on average. 53k counter, so you're right in the middle, like green likes to be. 8 2k counters, 12 blockers, and you're in that upper half of the blockers. 5 events. Great deck. If you're not going to play it, start playing against it. This thing's gonna get some wins. And finally, at number 1, the strongest creature alive, Mono Purple Kaido, 96 points. If you look at this list and you have seen my Kaido deck profile, you will see that this has some noticeable differences. But again, this is just a starter list based on what's average. Really, it can give you a good idea of what you're going to be playing against. If you do want the full version, check that video out. I'm very proud of it. I had a lot of fun making it, as I'm going to have fun making all these other deck profiles coming up. For Kaido, get rid of 7 Don't on your board, you burn a life. This can give you a very, very powerful end of game option. You can get them down from 2 life to winning the entire game if you time that counter out right. Super powerful effect. This list plays 2 Black Maria, 4 Higurashi for your chump blockers, 4 Who's Who for spot removal. You know how I feel about that in general, but it is worth trying out, and other people may find value in that I don't. 4 Sasuke for counter and ramp, 4 Black Maria for blocker. Again, as I said in the Kaido video, the Uta from the Film Star deck was very, very popular in this. The Black Maria was one of the more popular cards that would help us fit with the cost curve, so she is in there for now. 4 of the Star deck ulti, 4 of the set 1 DS Drake for our counter package here. 4 of the Queen, get this card out, get that advantage going. 2 each of the Kings, 2 each of the Kaidos. I personally like playing more of the 10 cost and more of the 6 cost, but it's just a nice minimum. You want to have this package in here at the very least, and then as you play and you see what you like and you don't like, you can increase those from there. 4 Blast Breath, 2 Thunder Bagua, amazing counter card. You can get some extra donut there, you can ramp with it even to the trigger. It gives you the freedom to let your opponent take those early life while you make them work for them. 2 the Brachio Bomber, just more deletion options with a wider range of characters you can hit. 4 Onigashima, you mulligan for it, you need it. Not hitting it hurts. Kaido has a very, very, very strong kid matchup, and that is a big part of why it's in the number 1 spot instead. But it has a lot of positive matchups across the board. I am going to show you the spreadsheet I have for the matchup rates based on all the online tournaments I've seen. The only ones I kind of question are Kaido's Dofi matchup and its Zoro matchup. I feel like its Zoro matchup should be lower. I feel like its Dofi matchup should be higher. In the end, that still gives it probably around the same rank as far as matchup goes, but it could just swap the places of Dofi and Zoro, which are already pretty much equal here. I am a firm believer that Kaido is the force to be reckoned with in this format. I think Kid is just barely behind it, but if I'm gonna pick a best deck in format, I will say it's Kaido because of the place that we're in, having had all the experience of the Japanese version of this format at our disposal. I do think Kaido is the deck to beat. Super cheap. This deck is mostly starter deck cards, and the Kaido and the King from set 1 are so cheap. $44.50 for this deck, $40.29 average, 59k counter. You are running a very heavy defensive package, so you can get to that end game when you're burning your opponent's life. 11 2k characters, very easy to soak up those 6k attacks. 11 blockers, 7 events on average. There's our BDIF. Those are all the lists we have. Got a couple more charts here just to give some more representations and put all we've talked about into a neat little package. So what I've done here is I have taken the wins that these decks each got with their expected win rate based on the matchup, made a nice little graph with them. You can see that there is a pretty linear progression starting from Red Green Luffy to Kid and Kaido at the top there. This is basically that formula I was saying I got the points from. The points you've seen are basically each deck's distance from that 0-0 point, how much in both these dimensions they are able to achieve. You're going to see that King is the outlier. The spirit of this video, King's the outlier. Again, good matchups, little results. Okay, fine. It's not good. It's a bad deck, but I still think it has a chance to be the best of the bad decks. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I just want to see it. Feel free to screenshot this. I hope it's helpful for you to get an idea of where these decks stack up in those different criteria. Finally, we have all of our matchup percentages here. The numbers you see on the screen aren't just, okay, wins divided by the total number of games. Different matchups are going to have wildly different numbers of games played, so I tried to weight that. That's why everything here is relatively close to even. But I also think something that's interesting about One Piece is that it's not quite as matchup dependent as other card games like Pokemon, for example. A hand trap isn't going to solve the matchup like in Yu-Gi-Oh! It is a game where the deck you build, your experience with the deck, and your playstyle is going to do a lot with how well you do in a tournament. Hopefully that's useful. We've got the scores for all of our decks in a nice bar graph over here, just again to give another graphical representation of how they relate to each other as far as their overall power level. I have had so much fun making this video. It has taken up pretty much every second of free time that I have somehow managed to find in these last couple weeks. And so if this is informative, helpful, gets you excited about the game, if it does anything for your overall experience as a One Piece player, I cannot be more thankful for that. Again, if you've enjoyed this and you want to support the channel, feel free to give it a like, a comment, a subscribe. If you just want to roast my take on King, say I'm on the copium. I'm the king of the copium. If there was something that you really enjoyed about it, if there is something that you got a cool idea to do based on this, please let me know. That would mean a lot, really do a lot to help motivate me to keep on putting content out here. Plan from now on is I'm just going to start grinding games, hitting up tournaments. Once I get to 30 games with the deck, like I said in the Kaido video, I'm going to start doing more deck profiles, doing more gameplay videos. There are, without a doubt, going to be departures from the lists I've given here. I want to just say one more time, these are averages. These are an idea of what is commonly played in winning lists. Not necessarily what's going to work best for you or for a given metagame, but hopefully it gives you an idea of what to expect. Thank you so much for watching. Sakura Kingdom here. I've had a great night recording this. It's almost 1 a.m. I should probably go to bed. I gotta get some stuff done in the morning. I'm gonna go to a con in the morning, gonna cosplay, I'll figure out who I'll throw out as soon as I get up. After I edit this, because I actually think I'm gonna spend a little more time on that just so I can get it out and not have to take time away from that for it. Thank you again. Sakura Kingdom, K Codes, appreciate you. Have fun and enjoy this amazing game that we finally get to play in sanctioned tournaments in real life. Have a great one. See you next time.